Hi, everybody. Sorry I wasn't able to attend yesterday. Fortunately/unfortunately, this was scheduled the exact same week as the Python Core Dev Sprints being held at Meta, just 2 stops down the light rail. So I had to balance everything. But I'm here today. I do have to also leave a little early. So if you want to talk to me, fantastic. I will be here for lunch at least, maybe for a little bit for the round of a feather session after the TLS talk. But I got to take off. But I'm on Zulip. Anyway, all my slides are actually on Obsidian, published at that URL. So if you want to see the slides there, pull that up, feel free. That's also always where I keep track of all my WASI work. So you can always look at that, see what's going on, see what my priorities are, et cetera, et cetera. But as Nick said, my name is Brett, Python core developer. We're going on over 21 years now. Used to be on the Python Steering Council. Was on that for 5 years since its inauguration until I decided to take a break. Blah, 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 work at Microsoft. Okay, so let's start with a little story because I think the reason I'm here is a bit unique. During the pandemic, my wife quit her job and decided to take a break. During that break, she got a certificate in data science from the University of British Columbia. Well, they did everything in Jupyter Notebooks, and that's browser-based for those of you who don't know. And she was doing her homework and took a break to have dinner and went back, and the cells in her notebook weren't executing. Now it's all Python. And she said, what's going on? I said, oh, you're probably disconnected from the server. Just refresh the running Jupyter Hub, which just basically manages a cluster of servers running Jupyter. I said, oh, okay, yeah, that fixes it, fine. Next day, in the car again, eating dinner, my wife asked, why didn't that work in the browser? Like, why'd I have to connect to a thing? And so I said, well, Python doesn't run in the browser. Here's the reasons why, blah, blah, blah. And she said to me, you should fix that. I stopped and I said, well, I actually been thinking about it. Here's what it's going to take. It'll take years. It's a bunch of work. Blah, blah, blah. She took a beat and said, yeah, you should fix that. So hence how I got into WebAssembly. I think this also kind of unfortunately means my wife's happiness kind of depends on Jaco supporting the browser. So sorry, but this is how it came here. So the real reason I'm up here talking is to give you an update on Python, where it stands, some of the stuff I have on the near term planned, and my little wish lists of a couple things. The first thing is the current status. So right now, Python is what's considered a tier 2 platform. I actually introduced the tier system in Python. It's modeled after REST. So tier 2 means basically WASI must be working in main at any point within 24 hours. So if you happen to commit something that broke, you have 24 hours to fix it, or you got to back it out. So effectively, it's fully supported. I could potentially push for it to be tier 1 someday, but I haven't pushed my luck yet. But tier 2 is basically as good as I think Linux ARM, just because we don't have it in CI. So it's pretty much as good as we can get. This is starting with Python 3.13, which is actually due out next week. 3.12 and 3.11 are tier 3, so best effort. But yeah, starting next week, WASI should be officially supported and will hopefully continue to be so. It's verified under Wasmtime 22 just because I haven't had time to run it under anything newer. And WASI SDK 24 is all good, tested in CI. As I said, 3.11, 3.12 are tier 3. If any of you are curious, it's all running on BuildBots because we predate GitHub Actions and all the fancy CI stuff. So a little kludged together, but it works. That's pretty much it. So key thing though is it's all supported. Now, one thing I will say though is it's technically WASI P1, but because I haven't updated it yet, it specifically is targeting the WASI, the Wasmtime 32 WASI triple. So I actually need to update that. Hence why I was asking about Zulip a couple months ago. So what's the deal with WASI P1? Now you know. One of the things I need to make sure I do is, because it's a tier 2 and any core dev might need to fix something that breaks because of their PR, I need to work on the workflow to make sure any core dev can work on it, whether they know what the hell WASI is or not. So I'm gonna need to set up a dev container with Wasmtime and WASI SDK, because one of the key pieces of feedback I get regularly is, I don't want to install anything, just give me a Docker container. So I need to fix that. Hopefully it won't be a big deal. I'm not a Docker expert, but I think it'll be pretty simple. After that, really the maintenance is pretty set. After that, it's trying to get some enhancements in. So one of the things I get asked constantly is kind of getting NumPy or Pandas somehow working with WASI. So I need to kind of look into that. That's actually also an internal ask I have. So kind of make that happen. External dependencies. So Python has built-in support for things like zlib, SQLite, xz, that kind of thing. So I haven't figured out, put in the time to get that all compiled into the static binary. Shouldn't be a huge deal, but every little project has its own way to build that .out file, which has to get linked in. Anyway, it's gonna be a song and dance, but I don't think it's gonna be anything crazy. After that, I would love to get a single self-contained Python.wasm file that can get distributed. Right now, it's a zip file of a bunch of individual little files. It's not the worst thing, but it'd be nice to kind of just point people and say, like, magically, here's that single file of all of Python, just go run it. I'd also, once I have that, or even maybe before, try to get official releases of Python.wasm. If you go to python.org right now, you can download the source tarball, you can download the Windows installer, the macOS installer. That's it. I'd love to somehow get WASI up to that level as well. And then eventually get WASI Preview 2 or 0.2 support. But as you can see, there's just like caveat as to why that's at the end of the enhancement list and not the top. And I'll talk about that in a split second. Because, and I have a slight wish list. This is going to be a very quick talk, by the way. First is threading. I'm sure you're all shocked. The main reason I want this is because Dirk wants it. And if Dirk's not happy, I'm not happy. As you can see, my happiness is very chained on other people's happiness, so it makes my life a little complicated. The other tricky bit here is to get the networking going and for me to officially stamp it as supported, I need to get test socket working. Test socket has over 800 tests, and they're all thread-based. Joel's fork of Python for Componentize Pi has it turned on, and he has to work with test ACIO, which has a subset of tests. Now, it's a lot of tests, but it's not enough for me to be able to claim socket support. So before I can do that, I need to get this working. I will also say, starting Python 3.13, Python's going to have an experimental free-threaded build. If you've heard of Python's infamous global interpreter lock, or GIL, this experiment's getting rid of it. So threading is going to suddenly become fairly important to Python, where historically we've been one of the few languages where threading was kind of like a thing. And so the reason WASI-P2 is at the end is the networking win is kind of muddled by not having the threading support. So if I can get threading, it makes the priority of getting to WASI-P2 way higher. Or once again, just make Dirk happy. The other thing is dynamic linking. Python, very much entire packaging story is around .so files if you're doing native code. And it's very much around an expectation that I download what's called a wheel file or WH file. You download it, it's a zip file, you unzip it on disk, you're done. Like that's it. You just run it. This is actually why a lot of people like Pyodide and going the encryption route when they do browser stuff is because they have this kind of support. So the idea that you can just download their builds and just plop it on disk and have it run really is enticing to a lot of people. And it's just what the whole Python community basically expects. So without it, it's kind of makes it a little harder to entice people to want to use the WASI solution versus like the encrypted solution, because it kind of requires that extra little step, which is like, I'm okay. Obviously, Joel's done some great work with Componentize Pi to make it so that you can simulate DL open DL-sim. But once again, it's that extra step that kind of pushes people out of the way. I would also say another thing coming into 3.13 is JIT support. And so obviously having some way to get JIT work in there, probably potentially through dynamic linking would be great, because once again, it's another thing that's now landing that's getting a lot of kind of traction where I'll have to say, yeah, you don't get that with WASI. Honestly, that's it. I warned everyone that was going to be a short talk. I'm happy to take any questions, but that's effectively the update. So once again, we're at tier 2. It's about as good as it gets for pretty much any platform. So it's great. Support's not going anywhere. It is preview 1 though, to Dirk 1, not doing P2 yet. Threads would probably get there. Excuse me. Dynamic linking would make the packaging story great and make it so I can actually host packages on PyPI, for instance, by the way. That's probably going to be a prerequisite to get stuff up there that's compiled for WASI. Otherwise, yeah, I have a to-do list and I'm doing the best I can to get through it, although I only get about 1 day a week on this project right now. So it's slow going, but I will get there.
Hey,
right.
Britt, I have a question.
Yeah.
This is Andrew online.
Hey.
And I think maybe you answered it, but like, can I just make sure that I understand? I remember talking to Dirk like at a WasmCon event months and months ago, maybe a year ago, and he was a big fan of WASI threads because it was simple. It worked in P1. Everything was good. He's like, yeah, I just like it, you know? Is that kind of what's, so my understanding from what you're saying is that this Python work is kind of stuck on P1 so that it can use WASI threads. Is that the reason or one of the reasons that's stuck on P1?
Yes. Okay. No, go ahead, Dirk.
I cannot hear Dirk if he's talking. Sorry.
Oh, you can hear me. So it's not necessarily Python, it's more the other work we are doing. So we try to get language servers and compilers up and running in VS Code Dev. And those are mostly multi-threaded stuff, right? So, and we, for example, can currently run language servers written in Rust, compiled down to WASM in our environment because we use the WASI thread implementation from P1. So we decided not to move to P2 because the threads fall apart and all the use cases we want to support will not work anymore. So it's for us not a target we need to support. That's the major reason. And we think maybe threads come slightly after or together with P3. P3 would be a much easier implementation for us in VS Code than P2. So we decided maybe it's good to wait. But the major reason is that the use cases we have besides Python, that they all require threads.
And just to clarify my situation at work, I get 1 day a week, basically because VS Code wants Python support, and otherwise my skip manager views this as quote unquote my baby. So he's basically being nice to give me the day a week. It's not going anywhere. I don't want anyone to panic, but that's why I'm saying Dirk's got to be happy for me to put the time and effort in.
Gotcha. Okay, so one of the things I'm going to say later in the threads talk is that I haven't been in a hurry to, get shared everything threads available for P2 everywhere right now, right? Like I haven't been in a super hurry because WASI threads seems to work okay for the people who like it and they're using P1 just fine and everything's good. And so I'm hearing that is still the case here, right? We do not need to be in a hurry with shared everything threads because by the time that you'll want to use it, it might be like the P3 timeframe or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And Dirk's shaking his head. So yeah, I think that's fair. I don't want to put any pressure on you, Andrew, specifically. It's, as I said, I have enough to do anyway, so it's okay.
Yeah.
From my perspective. Yeah. So yeah, if Dirk shakes his head, yes, and from my perspective, it seems fine too. I'd go with that seems totally fine.
Okay, I'll go back to being lazy then. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Andrew, can I ask a question? This is Till.
Yeah.
You say be in a hurry or being lazy. Can you?
What does that mean?
Yeah, are we talking days, weeks, months, decades?
No. So there's other projects that I work on, sort of like Brett is explaining. There's other things that I work on, and those can become higher priority when, unless there's a clear motivating use case for a feature or something like that. So actually one of the things I'm going to ask later in the threads talk is, do people have clear motivating use cases that can kind of motivate this to move faster? I don't think it's decades, but it's certainly in the longer months type of time scale, especially with some of the design issues that we'll like talk about in the shared everything threads talk.
So am I hearing sometime like late next year?
Sure.
I'm not holding you to it, just to be clear.
Yeah. I'm shrugging right now, so yeah, sure.
Okay.
The reason I'm asking is because that would put it solidly behind what I, hopefully not too optimistically, would expect as P3.
Yeah.
Oh, behind?
Yeah.
When's P3? When's the timeline for that?
So don't hold me to anything here, but I very much hope that that will happen a bunch earlier in the year next year.
Like midway through, like summer?
Maybe aside.
By the way, I also want to publicly thank Joel for hosting the Python guest languages meeting and admitting that, because sometimes it's just him and I, and he's still the one that types up all the notes and clicks the button on Zoom, and all the work he does as Pi listening to me ranting right about everything. So thanks, Joel. Yes.
Is there anything easier than threading and dynamic linking that would make your life easier, or is that kind of like it?
Yeah, I mean, so the thing to understand about Python, so it's implemented in C and it's very POSIX heavy, right? So I get to lean a lot on the work being done in WASI libc, and as long as it lands in WASI libc, I magically get it. And then I get to fight autoconf and C to make stuff work. So yeah, as long as anything else lands kind of in the WASI libc world, I can just pick it up and just use it, and I'm just done and I run off. It's just this is the level of fundamentalism that just really hits home. Like right now, literally WASI is the only platform that Python has to support that's non-threaded. Like Python actually for a long time had threading as an option, and then it got ripped out because there was no platform that Python ran that we thought would not have threading. Like who runs like that? And then here comes WASI, like, oh no, there's no thread support. So we had to like stub it all out and copy stuff from WASI-X to bring it all in and all that. So yeah, it's been kind of a reversal the way some things work within Python to make it all happen without threads. And it's fine, it runs now, but once again, everyone's moving forward with the whole like free threading. It was like, who doesn't have threads kind of thing. Now, they know I exist, they've left it off for WASI, it's no big deal, but I'm just afraid that the Python community is gonna keep on like, well, I can't download anything from PyPI, I don't get free threading, I don't get a JIT. Why do I want to run this version instead of just writing my own version of Python that's just built on C to run straight on the OS or container or whatever? So that's my concern. But no, these are the big ones I can think of. I don't really have any more of a wish list, honestly. Everything else, there's stuff like trying wiser to try to make startup work faster, that kind of thing. Trying to bring like maybe an HTTP library into Python so that we can directly use WASI HTTP instead of raw sockets, that kind of stuff. But that's all on me. That's not I need something from WASI to make happen. Just time, honestly.
Hey, I have an implication question. So if you're talking about, so is this implication correct? When P3 comes out, VS Code dev will switch to P3 via JCO in the browser. Is that the plan?
What we will do the same as we did with P1, that we try to wire as much of the WASI API up against our own API, because that's the benefit we gain, right? So we will wire up the file system against our internal file system implementation, because that gives us seamless integration with Git repositories and everything. So the benefit of everything we did for P1 is actually that we try to wire up the whole API against our API, because if you open up, if you want standard in, standard out, we can give you a terminal
Gotcha.
because we have a terminal
Gotcha.
implementation.
So this is
This is-
another
so it-
implementation of WASI.
That would be
Yeah.
another implementation. This is why at the end of the day, we decided, because threads are not there, that we want to skip P2, because it's yet another implementation we have to maintain. And then we even have not a good compelling use case right now for people to do something with it. So that we decided, or my hope was that P3 and threading was landing more or less together, but it doesn't sound like so, which makes it a little bit.
Who knows what the future may hold? We'll see.
Yeah, I think the good way to think about the VS Code motivation, especially from a Python perspective, right, is for those who don't know, there is vscode.dev, which is VS Code in the browser, and it fully runs. And Dirk's got it all wired up so that if you open up a GitHub repo in vscode.dev and run WebAssembly in it, it'll, because it's its own host, it'll pull up using the VS Code APIs, and so you can actually see all your files remotely from GitHub in that repo that you've just opened. And when you launch the Python interpreter, it sees all those files, and you can actually run Python code from that repo right there and do stuff, right? And so this plays into the education market as well, because VS Code EDU uses all this wired up system as well, and that's how they're actually able to host Python in VS Code EDU, so that schools just have to install that one thing, and then suddenly kids now can just learn how to code using Python, and it's all done via WebAssembly and WASI. This is also why they want NumPy and Pandas, because all the teachers are asking for that. But yeah, so the way to think of it is, yeah, VS Code is basically its own host, not just a straight Django thing. Hopefully that, so. Anybody else? Yeah.
If you get threading and not dynamic linking, how bad is that?
How bad is that?
Also the other way around.
So so that's an interesting question. So one makes Dirk happy and one doesn't, but one makes the Python community a bit happier. So the way I would, so if you were to ask me, the way I would go is, if free threading takes off, that would be a problem for not having threading. And as I said, I also want to keep Dirk happy, so that also plays into making threading happen. If you get dynamic linking working, that solves the packaging problem. So I think what if the concern is in this room, do you want to get Python developers onto WebAssembly, or do you want to get WebAssembly developers using Python? Because they're slow, because the funnel's different, right? Because if I want to get Python developers into WASI, I have to solve the packaging story, right? Because everyone's going to go, where's that package I rely on? Why don't I have this, right? And that's a couple of other things on top. I don't want to say, give me this and it's done, right? Like I'll have to talk with Joel and anyone else who works on WASI libc, because I have to figure out the backwards compatibility and forwards compatibility story, right? Because we heavily rely on like the Linux side of glibc always being forward compatible, right? So that you only have to compile once for a version of Python, and that's good, and you don't have to worry about what version of glibc you work on, versus we have to somehow coordinate the entire ecosystem to say, okay, if you're compiling for Python 3.14 for this wheel, you have to use this version of WASI libc. So that's another thing, but once again, that's not like we have to have it in WASI, that's a WASI libc thing, so separate. But if you do that, the deal that the tooling and packages work, it's just a slightly different runtime, simplifies that story, right? But I don't know how big free threading is going to be, right? Like the science community is making like, oh my God, it's going to be amazing. Threads, it solves the world's performance problems, right? Which I have personal opinions, but if that plays in, I have to go, yeah, sorry, we can't use that. I don't know, but once again, this is very early. They're experimental now, but like I will say, that has gotten like multiple people working full time on getting free threading working well. So it might become more and more a thing in the next 2 years, I would say. So I know that's not a very good answer, but
Makes sense.
yeah. Or why not both? I know I was asking a lot. To be very clear, I fully know what I'm asking this room. Hence why it's a wish list, not a list of demands. Anybody else? Anyone remote? All grab the hook that I actually manage to use all the time. All right. Well, thanks everyone. As always, you can hit me up on Zulip. You can always email me, or obviously catch me at lunch if you're in the room. You could also bug Joel. I tried to keep Joel up to date, so sorry, Joel. You can always bug Joel as well. With that, thanks.
All right, our next session scheduled is going to be the first Birds of a Feather sessions of the day. And so we're going to do the